today's subject will be the games of power that are played at the international level. And not only our guest for the panel today, it is His Excellency Mr. Ambassador of Holland, Matthijs van Bonsel. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Ambassador. His request is that you will have an active participation in our discussion, so I would please you to ask questions as Mr. Ambassador sees fit, and I will let him make the honors. Please.
Good morning. Indeed, I've been sometimes to universities here, and I was supposed as an old guy to talk for 45 minutes to young people, and you listen to the old guy, and then there's a break, and that's it. And I don't like that myself. So I'd like to turn it around. You talk, and I ask questions, or I react on things that you think or want to ask. Perhaps that's my experience with American education. I went to law school in the Netherlands in the 70s. I thought it was quite boring. I did not attend many colleges because there we had sort of grey ivory tower lecturers giving explanations about what was in the book anyway, so why should I listen to this guy and get up early? And these people repeated these things every year. If they would be good, they would not stay in university, but they were apparently not good enough to leave, so they were there. They repeated the same grey college papers, and I did not like it. Perhaps therefore I didn't like law school either very much. I went into university politics in the 70s. You had this in Western Europe, this May '68 Paris movement that students wanted to be in charge of things, so there was a lot of possibility to go into meetings and talk on behalf of students. And I thought that was much more interesting, the interaction with the then establishment of the university, and claim that we students wanted something else, that we had rights, that there was a democracy, and we wanted things differently. I finished law school in the end, and went to the United States. I studied a master's degree in the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I was surprised that there the method was totally different. It seemed chaotic in the beginning, because in law school there you do not get the theory, and you study the theory and apply it, but you get huge amounts of cases, relatively chaotic amounts of cases, and you're supposed to find the theory yourself, develop it, which is the common law, case law approach. The British don't even have a constitution. You distill out of practice rules, and then you apply the rules to practice again. And this interchange was brought to us as students as well. In addition, with all our democracy in Europe wanting rights, we did not have one thing, that is that students judge the professors for their quality as a teacher. But in the US, they didn't have this student democracy, but they did have the evaluation after every course or semester to judge the professor. And on the basis of these student evaluations, the professor was allowed to stay at law school or not. Which was something we had not figured out in Europe yet, in those days at least. These professors in Michigan resulted to be practitioners. They all had their turn in law practice or in government practice, and they would talk about these experiences. My major was international trade law, international economic law. So the main professor in that theme was and had been negotiator for the United States in trade agreements, in GATT, now the WTO. He would have negotiated in the Senate of the United States to get trade agreements approved. so he was skilled in pleading the case in favor of giving preferences to certain companies or to other countries or to negotiate tariffs and immaterial preferences. And that made the subject much more interesting. In addition, the Americans used the Socratic method, which is that by question and answer, you gradually find the way through a problem in interchange between the students and the professor. And I like that approach. I think nowadays, but you are here to judge, things are different in Europe, and we have gradually acquired a bit of that American approach, which is of course originally European, Greek, Socratic, right? So we invented it, exported it to the US, they improved it, and now we get it back. That's the idea of human improvement. Good practices travel and are tested and come back to those who invented it in the first place. So there we are. I would like you I understand that you're working on a declaration. You have to express your ideas. I am just an old guy with some experience in practice, so I might be a bit skeptical about good ideas, but some ideas also I think I have assimilated some knowledge around that made me rather more inspired to push them. And some of these ideas I would like to share with you. Some of the other ideas I would like you to try to challenge me and see why I'm so skeptical, because you can of course do much better than we did. If we see the world in which I grew up also as a diplomat, it was the Cold War period. My first job in the ministry. Let me just go back first to Michigan. I did my law school, I did a master's degree there. I wanted to work for the United Nations. I was an idealist, international law specialist. I applied for jobs in Washington with the IMF and the United Nations in New York, and then with UNESCO in Paris. And I did not succeed because they told us, look, you're from the Netherlands. Do you have the support of the government? I said, no, this is what I am, I've done this. They did not need it, that sort of persons. They're working on the basis of national contingents. So if you're from a country and your government pushes you as a new member for the secretariat of that organization, then you make a chance. And if Nigeria has already 5 people on the secretariat and Belgium has none, then you have a bigger chance if you're from Belgium than if you're from Nigeria, even if you're from Nigeria much more qualified than the guy from Belgium. I learned that lesson. We have to live with that. It also is the reality. Every state has one vote. Every state has equal rights. And there's a good reason for that. It's the basis of international law. And it's also what enables us, smaller nations, if I can say, to keep up with bigger nations. That's the funny thing about law. Law in international relations is the elaboration of the equality of states. So take football. If you are the Netherlands and you want to win in football against the United States, you have a good chance. If we would try a nuclear war with the United States, we would lose immediately. Romania could win easily of Russia if they give it a good try with football, not with tanks or with airplanes. But with football, we are equal. The rules are the same, the level playing field is there. You have 11 versus 11, and it depends on the quality you give those 11 to win. And in international law, it's the same thing. The rights of every human being, rights of every state are by and large the same. Of course, there are certain differences, but the basis is this. And it's rather surprising that even if you see the United States or Russia, they try to justify their behavior on the basis of that international law. They do not go into Ukraine and say, look, this is ours and I don't care about what you think about us. No, they try to give it a qualification of the rights of minorities, or the rights of ethnic groups, or the rights of different provinces to have autonomy. And they try to appeal to our ideas of equality, of rights for different groups, different persons, rules of international law that we have established, freedoms that are supposed to be there everywhere. The United States does the same. They could do without international law, but they don't generally try to do it. And even if they do breach international law, they try to cover it up and say that they're not. And then it's up to others to say what you are, and then they'll defend themselves. And this is a phenomenon that enables us to live in the world on the basis of rules. It is that what we have advanced on basic society, say the primitive society, where only the force of violence would come. We've gone somewhere. In Europe, we know better than anywhere else. We've tried with force for 2,000 years to expand empires or to unify the continent, to give preference to one ethnic group above the other, or one religion above the other, or one way of governing above the other. But it was always through force and domination. This time, in Europe, we're trying it in a peaceful way. And it's not a very well-functioning way. The European Union, the Council of Europe, or some other organizations we have set up, and we criticize them, including us, the practitioners. It's very boring that you agree, every one of you, say 28 states, but there's only Malta. Malta says that on some point they disagree. And if they have a veto right, then the whole group will have to wait till Malta is convinced, which will mean perhaps, if they have that veto right, that you will have to decrease the level of your ambition, and in the end come out with something grey and boring and not saying much. So that's as far as you get. The convoy speed is decided by the slowest ship. But still, if we go back and we realize that only 60 years ago we did it the other way around, through force, we are still better off with 28 tedious delegations talking to each other and one ship slowing down the convoy, rather than blowing the other out of the meeting and dominate him and tell him what to do in the name of the other. So in that sense, this is the world we give to the new generation. We got somewhere. If I could say, this is what I've been working on also after trying to get a job with United Nations and having failed. I went to Brussels to the European Commission as a trainee. That's also a story how I got in, but let's jump that. And then I applied for a job with Shell, I remember, and they said, oh, you're a lawyer, you have to go and first practice as a lawyer, go back and do 3 years of divorces and quarrels between neighbors. And I said, no, but I want to do international law. I want to advise a company how to deal with the world around you on tax issues and environmental issues, how to deal with NGOs. No, they needed lawyers, no PR people. In the end, also that was a disillusion. I ended up joining not the United Nations or the European Union, but an old-fashioned state, the Netherlands, my home country. And I have stayed ever since, working for what I thought as a student to be a bit old-fashioned. I thought the world would have evolved enough to have more actors in the world deciding on issues and not United Nations or the European Union, rather than states. But here we are, states still in charge of things. Question, great.
It's not just a question. goals in the end of this project. Could we actually, like, could you tell about that and tell us, like the organizers, tell you about our ideas and give us an opinion about how you see the problems or how you see the conclusions to the problems we found. If you think we have like more chances in a domain or less chances, like if the organizers would approve.
Yes, of course. So you are actually asking if it's possible for His Excellency to answer to the question for previous panels.
Yeah, for the 5 things from yesterday and.
Okay, it's okay with you.
I don't know them, but if you.
I will present it to you, of course. However, before we start, I would like to discuss the main subject of today, peace and justice, and then we will get to the subjects of the other dates, because that's the natural way of things. I believe it correct. If His Excellency is okay with it, we can do it.
Okay, I think it's a good practical point. I will keep this introduction short. Since I joined the European Economic Community as a trainee and later in diplomacy, also working on European integration, that subject, that organization has evolved enormously. When I joined the diplomatic service, the EEC, as it was called then, European Economic Community, was a relatively boring bureaucratic exercise of harmonizing the components of a microphone or what should be in the water or not, or harmonizing the prices of the potatoes and including what sort of worms should not be in the potatoes when you export them to other countries. But then the wall fell in Berlin, and from '89 on we have been unifying Germany, and in order to get a unified Germany to reinforce the European structure, including free movement between the countries, setting up a common currency, then expanding the European integration project to new countries from Eastern and Southern Europe. And there we are at this moment with a lot of countries, with a lot of subjects, and of course getting to the point that the way we try to work is getting at its limits of being capable of managing so many countries and so many problems. We see the consequences of that. Sometimes I look jealously at the United States for having a more harmonized system. But we are Europe. We have our history, we have our diversity, and we'll have to deal with that, even if it means long overnight sessions with delegations sitting around tables like these, trying to find ways, common ways. But we never forget that if we get a compromise, then we all of us are committed. Then we have found something that we all agree on, and not only one state imposing its will on the other. I think that's the good thing. Now let's see what you have worked at the last days, and I can comment.
I will introduce you to that. Our first discussion in our project was about the role of young people in our world and their place in our world, knowing that it's a globalized society and very developed when we speak about technology. And we wanted to know what can a young man or girl can do in this world, in this century, in the 21st century. And we have identified some sort of problems regarding these issues. One of them is the lack of active participation of the young people towards volunteership or civic actions. Another problem we identified was the very virtual world that forms in a globalized society. The informational, the internet, the very virtual world, and what are the risks of such structure. Another problem we identified was the lack of information in certain areas, in certain disciplines. Another problem was the lack of tolerance. We believe that it is an increasing need of tolerance through young people. Another problem we identified was the lack of security and the lack of a consciousness of security, if I may express that way. And the last problem regarding this issue of young people was the over-sexualization of society, meaning that sex, it's a taboo subject, yes, but it became a cult and infiltrated in almost every single aspect of our lives, especially in the way of life of young people. This was our first discussion. Our second discussion was about education, the education in 21st century. And here as well we identified a series of problems. One of them is the uniformization of the educational system, the lack of uniformization of the educational system with the professional environment. Another problem we identified was the lack of access to education, to fundamental education, as well as the lack of infrastructure to implement this access. Another problem we identified was the lack of education regarding healthcare. Another problem we identified was the lack of education that is non-formal education, and the quality of education where there is already an education, the lack of access, as I said earlier, where it's not. Also, and this we believed was the main target of the discussion regarding education, was the lack of a cult for education, meaning that the education needs a cult. Now, this was these two were the discussion in our first day. Yesterday, which was the second day of our project, we discussed about civil actions regarding the digital area, about e-government or different actions that implies the civil society to take different courses in developing the very society we live in. The problems we identified there was that this civic feeling, this civic participation of people is not very well encouraged by the institutional area, by the states, by the government in certain countries, Romania being one of them. Also, we identified that even though democracy is very well it's participating towards a very developed sense of civil action, there are certain countries that, even though they are democratic in nature by government or by the way of developing their actions in the society, they do not see civil action as a trait of democracy. Another problem we identified was that it's needed a bi-directional interaction between the government and society in order to implement certain civil actions that, well, even though people want to do something, they require the power only a state can provide. And the last problem we identified in this area was that citizen engagement it's lacking in many countries, and here we're not speaking about countries that are not very well developed, but in very well developed countries. This was our first discussion yesterday. Our second discussion was about slavery in 21st century, and we identified a series of ranges of slavery, a serious type of slavery. One type of slavery we identified was the very working, how to put it plainly, in the account of an unfundamental and unreal unreal work you had to do for someone. I mean, they want you to do something for them, but you are not supposed to do it. Some sort of how to say it, some sort of obligation you have towards that man, but you don't have it, but he believes you have it. Sexual exploitation, that was another slavery issue we identified. Non-coercitive slavery was another issue we identified. Ideological slavery was another type, as well as religious reasons or religious aspects of slavery that comes from slavery. Regarding our discussion on slavery, we have identified that certain conflicts, even though it's apparently a rule, that all conflicts, when they develop, they leave behind a slavery of war, meaning that you take prisoners, even though they are soldiers or not, they are civil, and use it as slaves, especially in the undeveloped areas where conflicts take place. This was our second discussion for yesterday. The last discussion we had yesterday was on refugees and stateless people, statelessness. We saw that regarding the refugees, the situation is very critical, since there are there are many refugees that come from areas affected by conflict, not necessarily by disasters, natural disasters, and that the fact there are countries who no longer can take into account refugees because they no longer have proof for that. But there are many refugees, and where do we take them? Regarding the statelessness, we thought that they are they are a little bit more special, if is to make a differentiation between them and the refugees. The refugees, they do have a citizenship, yes. Let's take, for example, a Syrian refugee. He's a Syrian citizen. But what do you do with a stateless people that doesn't have a citizenship? What can you do with him? Meaning institutionally or from a bureaucratic point of view? Yes?
Sorry, I wanted more like just to tell which were the topics and more what solution we had, and to give us an opinion more on how credible application of our solution can actually be, like from the more law and diplomatical experience.
Regarding that, the solution part of our project is about to begin tomorrow. So if you remember, we asked you to provide us problems, not solution. My colleague has something to say.
Starting from the subject we had today, peace and justice, I would like to focus on the first theme, the role of youngsters in the new era. And I want also to focus on the European Union and radicalist, extremist, and populist currents that arise and grew up recently, mostly on the youngsters. Which is the real threat regarding this? Because the European Union will be I don't know how to say. Will be received from the European Union. The youngsters are the future of the European Union, and if the youngsters don't believe in the peace project, which is the future of this project?
Okay, if there are any other questions, come on.
I have one, but it's
Okay, any other questions? Please.
Okay.
Not too many at the same time, because I also have to answer.
Of course, so yes.
We should have a debate.
A debate. If you
Can
would
I
like to
just start with the two first one and then come back?
Yes, you can start answering, and then we will have another question.
Yeah,
Okay,
answering,
right?
just I gave some
Points
some
for
points,
discussion.
one more. On Europe and on the World Security Council. Both take a long time to let's start somewhere. The Security Council, perhaps that's far from my daily work. We inherited that from our parents, so to say. They finished the Second World War, and this is how they thought they should start building up something new. In spite of numerous efforts of my generation to change that, we have not been able to change the Security Council setup in any substantial way. So we are still there with veto rights for countries that nowadays we might doubt whether they would have them if we would set up the Security Council today. But once you have a veto right, you normally don't give it up for whatever, because it's an ideal, as we spoke about Malta, let alone France or the UK. If they can block something, that's the best you can do. If you block something, you'll have a high price that the others will have to pay you to agree with what the others want. So it's like having a lot of money in a market, and you can exchange it for something, but you'll make sure that with your amount of money you get what you want. Could it be changed? Yeah, we've had groups of emerging countries trying to plead reason. I learned in law school, if the law is with you, you plead the law. If the law is against you, you plead justice. And if justice is against you, you plead mercy. That's sort of the way to work. So here we are in the area of justice. The law is against it. The law says France has a veto right. My French colleague is here, so he's not here, so I can relativate the importance of France nowadays. And Brazil or Nigeria or India would say, look, if we see the numbers and the potential and the regional representation, we would rather have a veto right or a permanent seat. Let's start with that. And France would perhaps say yes, but they want more. They want something in exchange, and I think no French diplomat or president wants to come home having given away something that is so precious. It also reflects the history. France was on the winning side just in time to be on the negotiating table when they set up the Security Council. It's a very difficult one to change, and I don't have a solution at this moment, but I think the most important, there are two answers. One is to plead justice, so let other regions do an appeal on all our individual convictions that equality of human beings is the basis of international organization, as I just explained with the example of football. We are not going to play football with the US having as much advantages as they would have when we are fighting a war. We are in another game, we are in a game of equality. So justice is on the side of those who want to change, and that can put pressure gradually, also convincing people that they have to listen to these arguments. The second one is the European integration. I was more idealistic in the 90s when we were making much progress in integrating Europe. The Treaty of Maastricht, the Treaty of Amsterdam, both under Dutch presidency, then the Treaty of Lisbon, and then the Treaty of Nice, gradually have tried to strengthen European decision-making, the European organizations to represent all of us. And one of the pillars, called the three pillars, one is the economy, the second is foreign policy, the third is justice. This foreign policy pillar that we were building was trying gradually to amalgamate France and the UK into one European policy. And that one European policy would then have the luxury luxury of having 2 veto rights at the Security Council, we might be able to do something with that. But at least the first step being, let's see if France and the UK can not only talk about their own ideas, but represent all of us Europeans there at that Security Council. Now, we have not been able to advance much since the 90s, I must say, in that area. These are also the 2 countries that have the special status of nuclear power, and they love to maintain that. Germany might be the strongest economic actor, but since they lost the war in '45, and we are still working with our parents' international order, they have to live with that for the time being, that they are strong in economy but not in rights in Security Council. So it's something we have to deliver to the new generation as an unfinished job, symphonie inachevée, and see whether you can, I would say, plead justice and keep integrating Europe. That's the short answer.
Thank you.
Now, what was the next? EU. Well, in fact, I answered perhaps also on European integration. But what has halted European integration, coming to the point of young people being skeptic about Europe? Remarkably, Romania is one of the last or lonely countries gradually where the general trend of politicians and public opinion is in favor of Europe. In the West, I think we did something wrong. We integrated Europe, we were very enthusiastic about it, and in the 90s, our parliament, our public opinion, and thus also us, we were convinced that the more Europe, the better for us, especially as a relatively small power. Surrounded by the British, the Germans, and the French, we learned our lesson in history that if we want to keep the big guys quiet, international law is the way out. European integration being a special way of regional international law, and the more law we have, the better for us. So we've been tirelessly working to integrate Europe, but if we now see our public opinion, they're tired. Some people say Europe is not strong enough. Look, they are not capable of doing this or not doing that. Others say, me, in the street, I only see the negative results. Look at me, I'm a citizen in The Hague, Rotterdam. There are foreigners everywhere. My job has gone. That's done by Romanians. And then the Romanians also come in my street. They take the job of my neighbor who is a truck driver. I'm now provoking you a bit, putting it on the Romanians. It's not generally Romanians. You talk about Polish people, or Romanians are not that present yet, but it's the general idea. And they mix this also with Muslims coming in from Turkey, from Morocco, from people from our former colonies, from Suriname, Curaçao, and this world that you politicians, you diplomats, functionaries, bureaucrats have given to us, I don't like it. My neighborhood has changed. My old culture is disappearing. My job has disappeared. And who is benefiting from this? The big bankers with their bonuses and their clubs and their you intellectuals traveling around. Yeah, nice, this euro, and you can travel everywhere without checking your passport. But what does it give to me? And we are a democracy. So if the people in the street, and we're now talking about the real, the lowest half of society, if I may say so, in education or in wealth, if these people are convinced that something triggers them to vote, and this issue is becoming as an amalgam of uneasiness in an economic crisis, with seeing other people rich and their culture changing and foreigners coming in, they are amenable to be assembled by politicians who say, I have the solution. And the solution is we close the border again, we jump out of the European Union, and then it depends whether you're right wing or left wing. We have both. banks, and the bankers should work on the state bank and not get bonuses. And the right-wing people might say, no, we have to be ourselves, we are capable of doing our own job, we are a successful Western country, and we can do without anything. We have the US, and also the UK wants to get out. We'll be fine on ourselves. It depends a bit where they put the accent, but the two currents are, talking about my country, quite appealing to that group that I described. Varieties of this you see in France, in UK, in Belgium, Scandinavia, and gradually also in Germany. Now, Germany is, as always, the bigger guy, and if this sort of feelings take the overhand in Germany, then we really have to worry. But it's not that far yet. But you see it coming. That's my not so positive answer on Europe.
How do you foresee the future of the European Union?
That's a bit taking things and handing it over to another generation. What we have done wrong, I think, is we underestimated the effects for the lower part of society. We've been making a world that is ideal for you sort of people. If you're well educated, you're fluent in English, you're internet oriented, the world is yours. When I was a student, things were not that open, and there was no technology, there was no single currency, there was no easy traveling or telephoning. These things have been achieved. That's something we should be proud of. But first, we have not explained clearly to public opinion that this is thanks to European integration that we have all these things. Secondly, the people that we just discussed, that I described, they are not that affected by these benefits. They are not that active on the internet. They don't speak that fluent English. They don't want to go to other countries. They just feel the negative sides of it. And I think we have not taken care to get these people also convinced that this is a good thing. Or other way, perhaps we should have done it in a way in which they would feel more comfortable with things. Now, that might mean that we have, on certain issues, gone too far. Free movement of persons, which is seen as perhaps as a benefit in Romania, but it's up to you to judge. But it's also a brain drain. And not a problem for doctors and engineers on our side, I should say. Nobody cares whether a doctor is Romanian or Dutch, as long as it's a good doctor. But if it's a truck driver, then people in these popular quarters, they live it. That was my job, and now it's a Romanian doing the truck. Why is it? And he does it for half the money. Huh? What happens? And this sort of things. But we've been working on this free movement, how to get the border controls away. And we've been negotiating tables like this for hours and hours and hours on what should be in the drinking water and what should not, in order to have a free movement of drinking water. We have even elaborated directives on the free movement of corpses. I was doing that in Brussels, and my colleagues were joking with me that I was going to Brussels, I could come back, and how do you get a coffin with a dead corpse moving without border control? Also that, the customs was checking that before we had European integration. So you need a harmonized system of what is in the coffin, what is the paper accompanying them, etc. And people were joking with me, then I said, well, I was recently in Brussels, and at the border, I think it was not smelling very freshly. Matthijs, are you making progress with this directive? Because they're piling up the coffins at the border in Belgium. This sort of things. You have a question?
Yeah. You mentioned that we would need more laws. Wouldn't you rather say that we need better shaped laws? Like, we still have a lot of laws that need to be more adapted to our current situation.
I would say we'd rather need less law. But if you try to combine two countries that are on 28, every country says that its system is the best. What we want in the water in the Netherlands is a good example. We have a lot of water in the Netherlands. So if something is allowed in the water in Europe, it all comes down in the end in the delta. Romania is another country where everything that goes in the Danube ends up. We have the same with the Rhine and the Meuse and a couple of other rivers. So we want as less possible chemicals in the water in the whole of Europe, because we know it assembles in the end in our country. If you are high up, say in Germany or in Switzerland, you wouldn't care that much, because whatever you throw in the water goes to the extremes and ended up somewhere else. So that gives a negotiating difference. And these things end up in the end in making detailed lists of what is allowed and what is not allowed. We have now this idea that we should deregulate. And people say, well, why so many regulations on a stupid thing like water? Huh? Let's take half out of it. But then immediately our governments would say, oh, but we don't agree, we need that because it's our health. And the Germans might then say, well, let's get away with that deregulation. We will not agree on that. And sometimes it's the other way around. We would say, let's let it go. Why care about something? And Austria would say, well, but we attach special importance to the rights of mountain farming, because they only have mountain farming, we have none. And it's not easy to harmonize things, and the more laws we have, the more detailed, means that we do not easily accept something from the others just like that. With workers, funny enough, and that's what I wanted to say, we don't have many rules. We made all these rules on water and microphones and the components of tomatoes and potatoes, but not what a worker can do or what salary he should earn, or not much else than there's a free movement, you need insurance, you have the right to find work, and for the rest, of course, if you're not entitled to have social access to social services. That was the idea, at least. You go back to your own country. But there start the problems. There start the problems that our poorer part of society now sees as a problem. We didn't see it in the beginning as a problem. Part of this is also that we now have to deal with the fact that the difference in development between Central and Eastern European countries and Western European countries is big. When we integrated the West, there was no difference in salaries of 1 to 10. I think Denmark is 10 and Bulgaria is 1. And Romania is a bit closer to Bulgaria, and we are a bit closer to Denmark. But if for an hour of work you can earn 10 times as much in Denmark as in Bulgaria, you will see, of course, in an area of free movement, workers will tend to go from the 1 to 10. We did not foresee that sort of thing. So we will have to make rules if we want to keep people, I think, on both sides comfortable with Europe. Because it also has effects in Romania, as well as in Denmark. Now it's your turn, yes.
Okay. First of all, let me thank you for sharing with us your precious wisdom about these issues. And I would have a question more about peace and justice. And we're certainly passing through very difficult times, especially here in Europe. As you mentioned, the problem with the parties, the populist and extremist parties in Netherlands, in Finland, in France, and many other countries, especially in Greece or Hungary. Problem with the flux with the immigrants coming from Northern Africa or from the Middle East, and why not the economic problems that we're not figuring out anymore. I don't know, but we have, I don't know, deflation, we have high unemployment, low growth, and so on. But I think that the most stringent and most important issue is that with our neighbor from the eastern part of our continent, with Russia. So my question comes as we have our institutions, main institutions, EU and NATO, which were shaped through the 90s and now in the 2000s on, I would say, misguiding basis. Like they were built on that we have a stable continent with peaceful, no wars on our borders, and that we are entirely peaceful. But right now, I think that we should think about differently about it. Like we have to reform them because the situation has dramatically
be interested to hear your ideas how to change them. I sketched the difficulties of changing the EU and the Security Council. NATO we haven't spoken about yet. If I were Russian, let's try to think as a Russian, and you were in the Cold War with your organization, Warsaw Pact, and then there was NATO on the other side, and you lose the Cold War. That's a fact. The Soviet Union was dissolved, Warsaw Pact was dissolved, the Comecon was dissolved, and many of my old partners, my old comrade republics, moved to the West. I would say in an EU or European American university, it's easy to say we appreciate that, we like that, we think it's logical. And I'm fully convinced of the fact that even if we have our deficiencies, as a Western world we have done things a bit better than in the communist countries. That's why we won the war after all. Not because we fought the war with arms, but we won on economy, on technology, and in the end on appreciating individuals to be free to aspire to earn money or to develop themselves and to become what they want. And in spite of the fact that the communist system as such is more interesting, everybody is the same, nobody has something for himself, but everything is for everybody, we know that it doesn't work. So you need something of this individual Western idea, liberal, that an individual can get something for himself. We are egoistic persons in the end. We want to acquire something that we feel comfortable with. If we only work for the others, things do not work in the end. Okay, that as a sideshow. Then we come back to the Russian. I don't think ideologically he would deny that communism was not a very successful idea. In the end, it was not the Russians who invented communism. They just happened to have a revolution that got that idea, and they won the internal revolution. But as a Russian, this was your organization, this was your counterpart. You see yourself as a big nation, and all your friends are gone to the other side. And this NATO expanded up to what you think are your borders. How do we deal with a country like that? I think NATO as such within our side is doing fine. We are happy in NATO. Also, it's not only in Romania, also in the Netherlands, it's not a question. It used to be in the Cold War. There were many anti-NATO movements then, anti-armament movements, anti-war movements. But nowadays NATO is not controversial at all. Neither is it here, I think, except for a few. But if you're Russian, you see it as something of the other side. You see it as a threatening one, because NATO expands just up to where you think your borders are, including Belarus, Ukraine, a bit of this neighborhood that has Russians in various percentages. So I think the challenge is, how do we get the Russians to be more, to feel more at ease in the world that we have today? They do not at this moment. If some Russians do, a leader like Putin can appeal to a majority of Russians to rally around him and have this idea of all the others are against us and we have to defend ourselves. It's as far as I could go to make an environment in which we would have to figure out then how to deal with the Russians. It could be the old American way, but I'm not so convinced of that. You say the Russians are wrong and what they want is stupid, and we condemn everything they do. But it seems that this only feeds this idea that they are uneasy with things.
Very simply, I think the question is inverse. I think it's more of what can Russia do for themselves to feel comfortable in this I don't know, era, rather than what should the international community do for Russia to feel comfortable. I completely agree with the fact that Russia does feel uncomfortable, but I don't think they feel uncomfortable because of the making of the international community. I think they feel uncomfortable because of their own their own works, their own making. So. As regards Russia, I think Russia should start working on wanting to be part of the international community, just like any other country has done. Palestine and I don't know what other countries have joined the United Nations or the international community lately. And then we can, look at actually creating out of the seriousness of Russia in attempt to meet that standard, creating an environment for which we can accept, or the international community rather, can accept Russia into it. I was very proud to see, not proud, but happy to see Putin come to table with what's her name, Merkel, the lady from Germany, and the president of France as regards Ukraine. And they had constructive solutions to what was happening in Ukraine. I think that is where we should be looking towards, having to get Putin to sit down at the table, discuss the situations and the problems, exchange sanctions and no sanctions, and then solutions and no solutions, and that way the EU and Russia can actually move forward more productively. But then it's kind of weird to have the European Union, for example, create an environment for Russia to feel comfortable. It's somewhat of too much of an outreach, in my own opinion.
Yes, I would like to second that. I don't know, the European Union, European states try to accommodate Russia after the 90s, and we've seen viable steps. I don't know, the treaties and the partnerships that were steps very serious taken from the Americans, not just Europeans. But the revisionist side of Russia has sprung up after the 2008, especially. So this is why I don't think that we should do something else from Russia, for Russia. But I don't know, the Western countries should actually be prepared for the new Russia that has changed dramatically.
Personally, I feel Russia is under a certain complex, the complex of trying to remain relevant while they're actually very relevant. And because of the pressure that's being put on them, because of this desire of theirs to be relevant, they feel the need to impose even more their relevance. I was reading an article the other time on, I think, Time magazine, about Putin being one of the most influential people, 100 influential people in the year, and it said he's a man that has chosen, when the international community gave him do this or else, he has more often than not chosen else. So if we are looking forward to a Russia that wants to be part of the international community or European Union, then I think the leaders of Russia should be on the side whereby they're looking forward to doing more of what they're asked to do rather than the else's of what, one of the reasons why Russia came to table to discuss with Germany and France as regards Ukraine was because of the intensity of economic sanctions that were piling up on them. And in no time at all, we could see that the economy of Russia was, falling and falling and falling. And of course, so if this is the style of relationship that Russia wants to continue to have with the European Union, it's going to be difficult to get Russia to, be part of, that society. However, if that changes, then there's a hope that Russia doesn't have to prove its relevance, but then just like every other country, it would be seen as equally relevant to, I think this is the complex that it's, in my opinion, this is the complex that it's dealing with at the moment.
Okay.
No, sorry.
No, I was just putting some oil on the fire. But
I was also trying to do that.
Sorry, I will be a little bit intrusive and I'll fly away immediately. We have a half an hour left. Okay.
So I don't know. I think the problem of the discussion so far has been that we generally see ourselves to be right. We have the, let's say, victor's complex. We have won the war, therefore we are right. We don't really have a lot of empathy in our dialogue and in our discourse, and I think this is where a lot of conflict comes from, because we see that the in the Ukrainian territory, we see it as obviously good, and why shouldn't it be? I think that we should really put more ourselves in the shoes of Ukrainians, where you see a lot of social divisions over this matter. I think we should have a lot more empathy towards and a lot more understanding towards the reasons of, let's say, Russia being so defensive as it is right
now. In direct response to the need for empathy, I believe that if an agreement should be reached between the European Union and a country, then I think that agreement should be just in between the European Union and that country. Just I think 2 days ago we were speaking about partnerships, which involves two different parties. If a partnership must be established, indeed it can be established between three parties. But then when two particular parties are interested in one result, then I think those two parties should play a principal role in determining the result of their partnership. In the example of Ukraine, the EU and Russia, we see that Ukraine and the EU want to reach a partnership, want to reach an agreement. I don't see any reason why Russia, whether or not they have an opinion to that partnership, I don't see any reason why they should influence or attempt to influence or participate to some extent in the understanding that is supposed to be reached between Ukraine and the European Union. And this is why I feel, and not because I feel like I'm right or I want to be right, but then I feel it is wrong for Russia to, to have taken the actions that they did, going back to your solution, using international law to defend their actions. No, it is wrong, and I'm one of those people that will say it is wrong for Russia to have done what they did.
With your permission, Your Excellency,
You're the leader.
I want thank you. I want to intervene in the discussion as a participant, not necessarily as a moderator. I have one short question for you, Toby. You speak about empathy to a leader that follows a very realistic notion of international relations theory. Oh, okay, sorry. Let's go. How do you see that? When the leader is a Machiavelli?
I think that's putting it too strongly, surely. But I would first like to address what Toby said. And you asked, why does Putin get involved? I asked, why does the US get involved? You saw those conversations leaked where the American State Secretary was giving directions to the newly formed government of Ukraine and telling them what to do, who to put in power, and so on. I think, again, we should really be critical about our position, and we should look both ways, because this is the problem with this type of discussion. We tend to focus much too heavily on the intrusions of Russia. We don't tend to look on the intrusions of, let's say, the European Union or the US, because we are somehow on that side, and that's why I think we should have more empathy. Of course, Russia is a very realistic-oriented country in terms of international relations theory. But I think America also does that. The difference between America and Russia is that America uses soft power as opposed to Russian hard power. That's the only difference. So again, I think we should look both ways.
Very quickly to move the debate forward. The only response that there is for that is Obama was standing behind the podium in the White House, and his army were in check when he said, "We support the Ukraine's desire to be part of the European Union. We encourage the collaboration between Ukraine and EU because we believe it is good for the EU and it's good for Russia, But obviously they didn't say it was good or bad for Russia, and apparently it was bad for Russia. Now, Russia, on the other hand, was not so diplomatic about the situation. They took direct action in fighting against something that they didn't believe in. So I think it's not necessarily who or what. It's it's how they're going about what they're going. The way Russia goes about things is, to my opinion, it's completely wrong. You cannot go annex a part of a country that has already, that we all know is part of that country, because you feel that, you know, it's a little too extreme for me, you know. And I think we shouldn't be scared to address the extremism, the way we see terrorism and say terrorism is wrong, the way we see sexual abuse and all these things that we can easily pick out, the way we see them and point them out. I think it's the same way we should see the actions of the United States of America, Russia, EU, and so on and so forth, and be able to pick them out and say, this is not right, it is wrong.
I completely disagree, if I may.
Yes, only that I wanted to mention that I see a certain concentration of our discussion in that part of the room, while this part of the room watches to a movie. Please, if it's possible, to have a more interactive.
Yes, you provoke somebody.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to mention, I agree on most points with you, but I'd like to mention that seeing Russia as a spoiled child is the wrong way to go about it. I mean, yes, their actions were completely wrong and completely against what we've established as international law norms, but you were talking about their relevance before. That's why that's the basis of the explanation why of their external policy. That's the way I see it. They are treated as a spoiled child, as someone who has to obey, as someone who has to listen to the bigger brother, which
Not
is
as a
the
partner.
United States. Yeah, they're not viewed as partners, or the platform of discussion is not built on the same level. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, like I said earlier on, that is a making of Russia itself, not necessarily the,
Yes, but
you know, so I think if that will, sorry to interrupt you, I feel if that will change, Russia should play a very, very big role in changing that.
yes, but that's exactly the wrong standpoint that I was referring to. Expecting Russia to make the next step. I know that's the way we see it. That's the way we perceive it as being normal. I agree with that. But not observing the underlying causes of their recent reaction is completely wrong. As we've done it previously, that's why so many terrorist movements have developed, because we were not able to effectively analyze the underlying causes, and that's a lesson that should be applied in the case of Russia. I'm not sure if I'm...
Now we have a good discussion. I can almost leave you and go home. Just on this point, I think I'd like
I
to...
would like to...
Oh, okay.
Sorry, but His Excellency was the first to say he has the word. Please wait for his version.
Very quickly. The rules we have in international law is one, but the undercurrent reaction of peoples in countries is another one. I'll give two examples. One is from Colombia. My wife is Colombian. I know a bit about Colombia, and we always disagree. So she's from, say, the elite of the country, and that's a democracy. It's a capitalist country. They're doing well. They're trying to improve. And then there's this guerrilla that they've had for decades already, and she blames Fidel Castro and the Russians and external powers. And I try to say, and look, if you keep the people poor as they are, and they have no chance to education or a democracy or a good functioning justice system to get somewhere and to improve their life, what do you expect? In the end, they will revolt. That's one thing. So we have to take care of that. It's capitalism. But I won't complicate my own story. But capitalism, if you leave it develop, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and in the end you get the tension there. Depends a bit how it evolves, but in Colombia it evolved in violence, and we're still facing that. And there are more countries, and perhaps also in the Middle East, we can see examples of what happens when you don't have a society that believes in its leaders, and they get internal conviction that violence is the only way to change things, or extreme beliefs. Another one, Russia. I've been in Japan for a while as the head of the economic section. That was some 8 years ago. And at that moment we had Shell, again, one of the bigger companies that is Dutch, British. They were working in Sakhalin, so close to Japan, island of Russia, developing gas, huge gas facilities to export from Sakhalin, from Russia, especially to Japan. Japan has no natural energy and they wanted that. Shell was doing it. Putin started to make life very difficult for Shell. And in the end, it was clear that he said, look, you have a contract to work here, but this contract you made when we were lying on our back, we were weak, our leader was drunk, and you exploited our situation. And I sometimes think of that also in the present situation. They have the idea that we exploited the Russia that had just lost the war. And the same this is a lesson in history that sometimes we learn, sometimes perhaps we don't. After the First World War, how we treated Germany, squeezing it out, making it pay, cutting it in pieces, taking its army away, taking its leaders away, and the Germans 30 years later revolted in a very extreme way. And we needed the Second World War and a much worse one to settle things, even though it's not a very pleasant settlement, including the United Nations Security Council. But the First World War evidently did not settle things in a stable way. So we have to take care of these things, even if we dislike the Russian behavior with regard to the rules that we've made with them and that they should respect. The rules is not everything. There's also an undercurrent that you have to try to find out what triggers others to behave as they do, and how do we deal with that. So those are my remarks. I think now you can go ahead again. I listen.
I would like to say that the best position in my point of view is an objective position, because that's the interesting part in international affairs, that they are based on values, and nowadays we can talk about more pregnant cultural conflict, and I think that both parts are right. I don't think that our set of values are necessarily right. We also must take a look on how Russians feel about us coming onto them.
Thank you very much. Replying to my colleague, you made mention of the fact that Russia, everyone is waiting for Russia to take action. I think the contrary is the case. No one is waiting for Russia to take action, and everyone is taking action with or without the support of Russia. Whether Russia wants to take, and we can see this in the many sanctions that has been placed on Russia. The international community is directly telling Russia, look, you must either come to the table to talk, have a conversation, and try to help us find a solution to the problem, or else we will, go on to, and more often than not, like I said earlier, we have a case where Russia is choosing the L's rather than, let's.
I think the easiest way to understand this constant in Russia's reactions is that we should be able to understand that they are trying to counterbalance the Western hemisphere of influence as they've done it in the Cold War for 40 years. They have not renounced the idea, and we have to understand that and accept that as a premise in understanding their reactions.
It doesn't make their actions legitimate.
I'm not saying that. I would never say that.
Okay, so
it's just that I'm trying to understand their reactions, because I believe that's the starting point in addressing the issue. That's all.
Sorry to be so persistent. If that is not legitimate, then I don't think we should we should, to some extent, find a compromise for that.
But you see,
it's not. I don't believe it's necessary.
The fact that
guys.
we are.
Thank you. Now we see new participants that want to say something. So let's give them the opportunity to do so, because I don't want to be a pain, but we have 15 minutes left.
Can I conclude this idea?
Yeah.
So you can conclude after they ask the question. So let's be fair.
I really want to let them finish their ideas. I just want to make a short comment. I just think that we might make a mistake because we are simply dividing the parts, the West and the East. But what about the fact that the European Union is not just united as we might see it? Because let's see, the Hungary and the Greece were just moving towards Russia, and I guess when we say the West, the European Union, we refer to them as a strong, united entity, and it's not just like that. And I think this is a big issue to take into consideration. Now I just want them to finish.
No, you're right. That's right. That is the weak part, the weak point on our part. Russia is more united and can act quickly and make fait accompli on the ground, and we have difficulties to deal with that. We always have. We are negotiating. We are ideal for diplomats that want to talk and talk and talk. There are a lot of people trying to make decisions, prepare them for Mrs. Merkel and President Hollande. In the end, to take that decision. Even then, we disagree. We go out of the meeting and we go different ways. We have a difficulty in that, and that we discussed already. We cannot integrate Europe much further, but we have to deal with that weakness on our side. The Americans have easy talking, because they're also relatively easy. They have disagreements between the Senate and the President, but to the outside they're one big player. But it complicates things for us that they can also play and say, look, the British are on our side, and then the Germans that are more closer to Russia or have their history or economic relations, they tend to see things a bit different. And we have the weak guys like Greece, as you say, or Hungary, for political, economic reasons, try to play the Russian card. That's our weakness. I have no solution, but we no direct solution. I think Greece shows what happens if states do not behave according to the rules we make. That's one thing I should add to that. That's important. If countries do not even obey the few rules that we have in Europe, we cannot continue. That also has to deal with Romania, I should say. The rules we have, you have to obey. No beating around if there's a rule. And we cannot enforce the rule among all of us. In the end, we end up as a disintegrating club of countries. That's one thing that worries me with regard to Romania. But that's another point.
Okay, so we have a new participant here that wants to ask a question that he didn't ask before.
Your Excellency, there was a few days ago, Merkel issued a statement in which she mentioned the possible creation of a free trade zone between the EU and Russia, if Russia respects the last Minsk agreement. Is this compromise or trade-off that can basically repair all the damage done by the economic sanctions? Is this fair for Ukraine? That looks pretty much as a trade of justice for peace. Can you comment on this?
Not in a national position, but as a person, I think that is an interesting idea. It challenges Russia to become a partner again in our world. So it's worth trying and see how they react to it. Of course, we also try to open up the EU or NATO to Russia, except for inviting them to become a member. But we did try to engage in free trade, which is our strength. We are the West, we are the traders, we have the economy, and we wanted to share that with them. And in a large extent, they did. They are now also a market economy, perhaps governed by more mafiosi than a small and medium enterprise. But still, they are part of the capitalist system. And these are the things that we have used and are using in the Western world to make one family of nations, so to say. Trade is what links us together, and that is also the basis of European integration, by the way. We opened our borders for goods, services, capital, persons, in order to grow together, and we know that the bigger the market, the more efficient it can be, if we make rules that govern the market and countries respect those rules. So I like these ideas, and then it's up to the Russians to to tell us what they like about it or what not. But it's an opening.
And in regard for Ukraine, do you think we can appease them?
Problem with Ukraine is that if we see the guys governing the country, and I'm also an ambassador in Moldova, it's comparable. The money is assembled in the hands of a few barons, and they don't care about the general national interest at all. And we are not very sympathetic to helping those guys to keep their oligarchy functioning. We would like to help the people of the Ukraine, but necessarily are the guys behind, not perhaps the president, but the guys behind the screen, pulling the strings. So are those guys to be engaged? Can we engage them? Can we expect them that if we come, we expect a functioning system of rules, of justice, of paying your taxes, of respecting that there's a possibility for everybody to develop himself? These things are not evident in Ukraine, and we have to therefore encourage Ukraine to develop into something that's a bit more akin to the West, I would say. More democracy, more market economy, more justice. And we are working on these things, but it takes time. The free agreements that Europe tries to make, for example with Moldova, are exactly that. Open up the market, give the people a possibility to study, to set up companies, to have protection of the law, protection of unbiased, uncorrupt judges. If you have a problem with someone, to have taxes paid by everybody, by a clean government to put it into health, education and infrastructure. These are things that we cope with in our countries, and we want those to develop also in the Ukraine. That's not exactly how things go in Ukraine or in Russia, for that matter.
Okay, now with His Excellency permission, and we'll see what other participants want to ask question. We have 5 more minutes. It is okay for questioning in this one, okay? And if there is anyone new that did not ask anything, if wants to ask, yes. What are the questions? I want to see the paper. Okay, Toby, let's see. Okay.
I noticed that we talked a lot about other countries, but we mentioned a little about Romania. And I would like to see your position, your opinion regarding the position of Romania towards the European Union, and also if you think that there is a contrast or strong contrast between the public opinion in Romania and the position of the government.
Well, that takes more than 5 minutes. I try to say a couple of things about that indirectly. I think that Romania is on the move. It is changing. It's becoming rapidly a new Western market economy, functioning justice country. But we are in the process, and you have to give it decisive movement in that direction. And you have the support of the people. You have a clear consensus about NATO and the EU. And you have people like yourself fluent in English, which is not everywhere the case in Central and Eastern Europe, and Western oriented, and with a Latin, so Western culture, and with a relatively good education. So go ahead, keep moving. Is there, with regard to the media, these are not typical Romanian things, but if the media are governed by oligarchs, you have to be careful. I go into the countryside and I meet people that only watch Antena 3, and they have a particular view on Romania, which I immediately recognize when they're hitchhiking, they get in our car and we're talking. And this idea that one politician is extremely bad and the other is extremely good is I don't think it's very healthy. We are trying to make societies where, like we do today, we have different opinions, we listen to each other, we try to find compromise. There's no black and white. neither within countries or between countries. We have to find ways, and the idea of empathy, whatever the rules are, I think is important. You have to think about what the other is doing, why he is doing. There are rules you have to respect, but there's also the idea to try to technically as a diplomat, but also as a human being, try to think what is moving the other, why is he reacting differently, and how can we compromise on that. Romania I'm optimistic about Romania, but you have to keep pushing things in the right direction. And I think you'll get there. We are a bit critical, and I think we have to be, we say, look, you became a member of the EU, we have these and these rules in the EU. If you respect those rules, you're a member of the club, but secondly also you'll see that your country keeps developing. That's why we made these rules in the beginning. The market economy is the core. So if you make rules to deal with banks this way, or with state enterprises that way, or with the national budget that way, you have to implement those rules, because those are the rules of the club that Romania joined. There's no way around it. And it's not a foreign domination or interference in internal affairs. You become a member of the club and you have to respect the club. If it's a football club, you have to wear the shirt of the club, not another color.
Now we really got to the end of our discussion because the time doesn't allow us to be more. But with your permission, we can take that question, of course.
At this time, Russia has business with China, a second world power. Do you think that this alliance will galvanize Russia on international stage? Do you think that they will raise confidence on relation with US?
Those two together, we have to be careful what they are doing. With regard to our world, the new ambassador from China came to me recently, and he knows that we are the biggest source of investments in Romania. That's not all Dutch enterprise, but we are a country where companies coming from there, they invest in other countries. So he asked me if is it okay, is it welcome to invest in Romania? And I told him, yes, sure. The only thing you have to take care of is that here we have rules that are European rules. If you respect them, just like the Romanians or the Americans, for that matter, or ourselves, if we respect those rules, every investment is welcome. So it's the same with China or Russia. In our world, we have rules. These rules, we have to respect all of us. We should not accept that politicians under the table make deals with Russians or Chinese. Everything should be open, transparent, so that everybody can watch. And then if a Chinese company invests in Romania, great. That means that they see an opportunity in the market to grow, to create jobs, to make money. And that's what the Western market is about. But that's the only condition. If it's transparent and respecting the rules we have, let's say the World Trade Agreement rules nowadays, or the association agreements, the trade agreements we have, that's the only condition. It sounds simple. Of course, it's not that easy, but this is the major condition, I think, to say, we as Western world, Russia, China, big other countries, these are the rules. Be welcome.
Okay, now I really have to put an end to this. Sorry, it sounds so dramatically. But we need to take a break, so we all like to thank His Excellency for being here today and animating our discussion so well. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. I enjoyed it because it was very, very rich in discussion. Just a little announcement. With His Excellency permission, we'd like to have a photo at the end of the session now. And there you go, a break of 30 minutes. Thank you.